I was born in a Korean family, and like many children, I naturally adopted my parents' worldview. They consistently fostered strong work habits and instilled in me the value that family comes before anything else. These lessons have helped me to form a sense of self, an identity in which I take pride in. At the same time, we stand to inherit something else from our parents. Many of us carry on the biases of those who came before us. Some beliefs can be explicit and sensitive, such as having a dislike for a certain group of people, and others may be more implicit and unconscious, influencing the actions and decisions without the individual even realizing it. Throughout world history, terrible atrocities have been committed across all regions of the globe. One such example is the Japanese military occupation of Korea, which lasted from 1910 to 1945. During this time, the Korean people endured cultural suppression, forced labor, and widespread suffering. One of the most notable acts of cultural suppression was the forced adoption of the Japanese language, with Koreans required to speak Japanese at schools, government offices, and even at home. Korean names were also replaced with Japanese names under the Soshi-Kami name order, a policy issued in 1939 as an attempt to eradicate Korean identity. Korean citizens were also forced to work in Japanese factories and on military projects, often under harsh conditions with little or no compensation. The occupation also saw the horrors of Unit 731, a secret Japanese military unit responsible for conducting gruesome biological warfare experiments on humans. Though most of Unit 731's victims were mainly Chinese, many Koreans were also subjected to cruel experiments involving germ warfare, vivisection, and exposure to extreme conditions. These victims are ultimately known as marutes, the Japanese word for logs. These experiments, disguised under the cover of military advancement, resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Despite the occupation ending due to the efforts made by many activists, this period remains a painful chapter in Korean history, marked by both resistance and suffering. Although my parents didn't directly experience this event, they grew up learning about it from their own parents, from their teachers, and from their history books. Through that, they internalized the anger, fear, and resentment of the lost voices. Their experiences, their biases, and their ideas have had a profound impact on my own worldview. Growing up, whenever I brought up any interest in Japanese culture, I could sense my parents' discomfort and tension, but they never explicitly said anything negative. That's often how bias shows up. It's in our body language and what is not said. At the age of 11, I began to do my own research of my cultural history and finally understood why they felt so uncomfortable. After learning about the atrocities, I found myself beginning to form a biased view of the Japanese. At the time, I wasn't considering alternative perspectives. However, as I grew older, I began to question myself, and even my friends began to question the statements I would make. This led me to some deep internal reflection. I wondered, is this my actual opinion? Is it fair to think this way about a whole group of people? As a growing teen in a fast-paced world who wants to build new connections yet is actively exercising exclusion, is this the right path for me? Is this who I am? That's when I realized that this aspect of the beliefs we inherit, no matter how deeply rooted they are, they don't have to be the ones that define us. We have the power to reflect on what we, as individuals, truly believe in. Today, I wish to explore something that often goes unnoticed, yet we experience in various ways: the impact of cultural and familial ideology. More specifically, how these influences shape youth and construct our beliefs. My talk will review how these influences affect the younger generation, how they mold our worldviews, and how, as young individuals, we have the power and responsibility to critically reflect on these beliefs. In a society that's becoming increasingly multicultural, we're also witnessing a rise in division as a result of misunderstanding, the inability to see the world through someone else's perspective, and the struggle to balance tradition and progression. I believe one of the most prominent causes of this are the ideologies being passed down through families and cultures. These ideologies not only shape our identities, but can have a profound impact on our own beliefs and values. From the moment we were born, we begin to build our identity from the environment around us. This includes the stories, traditions, and values that families pass down through generations, all acting as important aspects that become part of our core identity. Our worldview, often described as the lenses in which we see and interpret the world, encompasses our understanding between right and wrong, our perceptions of others, and even how we view ourselves in society. Similarly, ideology refers to a set of principles that guide our behaviors, actions, and decisions, and are often deeply rooted in the cultural and familial beliefs we inherit. And it's not only family that influences us. Our society plays an active and essential role in the process. This includes media, social standards, and education, which are all huge contributors to our ideological view. I'm sure many of us can think of examples related to how the media and social standards influence us, but I would like to give one around education. While helping to build our knowledge, education can sometimes unintentionally introduce additional bias, like the way history is taught, the perspectives emphasized in books, and the stories that are prioritized over others. Such was my parents' experience. My core message is to acknowledge that we have the ability to reflect on and challenge certain beliefs. As young people, we often feel a sense of obligation to uphold the beliefs and values handed down to us by our parents. So this means it's easy to assume that just because our parents say something is true, it must be true. Of course, it can be true or it can be false. But overall, we have the ability to question, reflect, and decide on what we truly believe in. When we take this time to reflect on our inherited beliefs, we allow ourselves to grow beyond the boundaries set by those who came before us. We learn to think critically and to make decisions based on our own experiences and values, rather than simply repeating what has been thrown upon us. This brings us to the immense responsibility that we must take seriously. It's not enough to simply accept our parents' or culture's worldview. We must actively shape our own. This doesn't mean rejecting everything we've been taught, but rather giving ourselves the freedom to choose what fits with the person we want to become. And this is where the younger generation has incredible power. We are at a point in history where ideas are being tested more than ever before. We are the ones who can bridge divides, who can question outdated beliefs, and who can embrace diversity in ways former generations simply could not. But we also must be cautious of the fact that the ideologies we adopt and pass down will influence the next generation. If we fail to question our inherited beliefs and simply pass them on unquestioned, we may continue to cycle up bias, misunderstanding, and division. However, if we take the time to critically examine what we believe and why we believe it, we can create a more open-minded and compassionate world. So I ask you today, what beliefs are you carrying? Are they yours? How do they impact others? We all have the ability to shape the future, not just by mindlessly accepting what we've been taught, but by thoughtful questioning and deciding on which beliefs we hold dear. So, let's embrace our power and responsibility and use it to create a world that has the potential to be more thoughtful, inclusive, and open-minded. Thank you.